Welcome to the Beyond Body podcast with your hosts, Mia and Holly. Join us for a sometimes fortnightly podcast
where we explore all things mental health, being a messy human, and how to get the most out of this one precious life.
and all the ridiculous stories in between. Welcome back, everybody. Hol, so wonderful to be with you again. How have you been?
I'm really good. It's so nice to be back, everyone. I was just saying to me before we got on, my best friend's just had a baby, so it's a very exciting time in my end of the world.
That's such a coincidence because, as you know, I was in Canberra on Monday and saw my best friend who is 6 months pregnant.
Oh, what?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Canberra.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, she lives just outside of Canberra. She lives like on the ACT border.
Ah, oh, wow.
Yes. Yes. And
Baby
first
season.
baby, best friend from high school. And if all is going to plan, the baby's going to be is going to celebrate their birthday 3 days after mine. So fellow Sadgie.
That's so funny because this baby, who was only born the day before last, he was meant to be born like around my birthday. And I
Yes.
was off this idea. Everyone's like, oh,
really?
that's so nice. I was like, no, it's not. I don't want to share my birthday with my best friend's firstborn child.
Hands off. Yeah, I think that because as you get closer to Christmas as a December baby, like people just don't really think about your
So
birthday.
right. It is
So I was like, I will be the auntie who will be all over that birthday as a mid-December baby. So she was like, I'm just so worried that if it's too close to Christmas, I'm like, I've got you, girlfriend. I've got you.
yeah, it is so hard. I think having a December birthday, but even like an early Jan birthday, I also think is hard because
Oh,
like
everyone's over it.
everyone's over it and like no one's got their head screwed on straight and people are away and everyone's like poor after like the holiday season as well.
As an introvert, I always loved it because I could either, if I wanted to do something that was more sizable celebration wise, I could do it earlier, which
Uh-huh.
then felt a little bit less like pressure. Or if I wanted to do something low key, I could get away with it without offending
Yes.
people.
Yes, yes. And particularly it's good if you're introverted and you don't really necessarily care if people like forget or like don't send the message on the day. Don't have
I
that.
couldn't care less. I'm one of those friends where I'm like, I will probably forget. And so you have every right to forget, even to this day, because my Josie and my mum are 2 days apart with their birthdays and they're uneven numbers of 23, 25. And my
Mm.
brain just for 32 years has not been able to store this away properly. And I have to check every single year. So it's not a lack of love thing. It's just
Totally.
I cannot, my brain is like a sieve with that kind of information.
Totally. And I think that's such a great recognition when you get older, realizing like if people like forget something or like forget a detail, it doesn't mean that there's like a lack of care. It often just means like we're just busy and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Different, like if you need anything, I'm a phone call away, but I'm not going to
Absolutely.
remember to text you for your birthday.
Yeah. And that's so fine. It's great to like have realistic expectations in this life.
Know thyself.
Myself.
So today we are doing a follow-on from the episode which will actually be going up today in our land, but not for listener, the people land. And that is some additional information that we kind of find ourselves sharing or advice we find ourselves sharing with clients on a pretty much weekly basis. And we just had so many that last time we were like, we could just keep going, but let's make it a little separated episode situation and not a 2-hour marathon.
It's so interesting because obviously everyone, you know, their recovery is going to be different. We have such different behavioral profiles we work with and people come from different experiences, but there are a lot of common threads, particularly with some of the fundamental work in terms of the healthy self, eating disorder self, learning to sit with discomfort, being able to regulate emotionally, process your experience. So these are just things that I think, I guess they're like pieces of advice,
Yes.
but also conversations that we would have literally every single week.
Yes, if not daily. And I'm going to start with one that's specific, but I would say applies to 90% of the people I've ever worked
Okay.
with.
I'm so excited.
Eat breakfast within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. And then the addendum is eventually make sure you're eating every 2 to 3 hours in intervals of 3 meals, 3 snacks, and make sure that eventually they're adequate. But if you have to find a place to start, if you are not working with a coach or you want to know what it's like to work with a coach, when we are looking at the blueprint of how somebody's eating, we do know the full history intake of how they've developed their relationship with food and body over time. So it's a very specific history intake through that lens. And then we're doing the blueprint of what's happening currently with food traffic lights, where we look at your fear foods, your safe foods, the in the middle foods, how you respond to food with anxiety. And then we look at your average intake. What is that currently looking like? 90% of the time, people are delaying food. And the reason why I think this applies to so many people, and somebody might hear this piece of advice and be like, well, that only applies to people with restrictive eating disorders as we understand them in a stereotypical way. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because I've talked about this before, we've unpacked this before. Restriction takes a lot of different forms, and the regularity with which you eat is a very common form of restriction because your body doesn't care necessarily how much volume of food it's getting across the day. If it's being put into restriction for a period of time during the day, it's reading that and experiencing that as restriction, full stop, which is why we might then find people with profiles where it's not complete restriction and that's the only behavioral element, but there's binging towards the end of the day, or binging and purging towards the end of the day, where there's that sort of out of control sort of feeling that they want to address. It's so interesting because they'll come and be like, so Mia, I do these binging behaviors and I want to deal with that. And I'll say, well, do you see all this restriction that's happening at the start of the day? That's where we need to start. And they're like, no, I want to keep this. This bit I like.
Totally.
I want to get rid of the binging bit. And the truth is that you're trying to fix all the dominoes that have fallen down by just addressing the last one. You're not willing to look at the fact that the restriction is the first domino to fall, and you're just trying to work backwards with something that cannot come from the end point. It has to come from the beginning. So I would say across every single diagnosis, non-diagnosis, behavioral profile, this is one of the most common areas that needs to be addressed ASAP. This is usually the first goal I'm setting with people. Let's try to have something at breakfast 2 to 4 days this week within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. And I found over the years that was the most effective way to get people on the board in terms of we're setting goals, but it also is a great starting point because we can already start to get some really great evidence really quickly in terms of cognitive connection, their ability to have energy, their ability to get more in touch with their hunger cues, which can be scary, but also a lot of people want to be more trusting of their hunger cues, and you've got to have them to trust them.
Absolutely.
I just have found this is such a go-to. This is where we start, and it just demystifies the whole process for people where they're like, I just don't know where to begin. It's like, this is 90% of the time exactly where we're going to go.
We will tell you exactly how to begin at the beginning of the day.
That's right.
The importance of this cannot be overstated for so many different reasons. And I had a first session with a new client yesterday, and the behavioral profile was predominantly binging. And this client said straight up, it's just a binging thing. There's no restriction. I'm taking my notes going, let's talk about that a little bit more, because like you were saying, restriction comes up in so many different forms. It's so easy to just think it's like, well, I eat food, like I don't skip meals, right? Like that kind of mentality, therefore I don't restrict. But of course it's how you allow yourself to eat. It's when you allow yourself to eat. It's what you allow yourself to eat. Are we just cutting off random food groups for no apparent reason and not really sure why it's just happened? And even to say someone like their restriction is actually only mental, still psychological restriction.
Yes.
Even if someone is saying, if they're that person, say it's like we're talking about a binge behavioral profile, and they're kind of like stuck in that cycle every night, or a lot of nights of the week of like, I'm just binging, but they'll have that idea of like, oh, but tomorrow I'll be better, and like tomorrow I just won't have breakfast, and like this will add up for 2 meals, or whatever they may be saying, that like last supper mentality. Even that is starting the cycle of psychological restriction. And then it's like setting that person up for failure the next day. So like you said this to me years and years ago, where it's like, even if like you've had a hard night of behaviors, you need to get up the next day and eat breakfast, because obviously it's like it's starting you physiologically on like the right foot, but also it's that that measure of I'm doing this for me because I'm worth it. And even if, because I think a lot of people struggle with binging, that next day it's like emotional hangover times 10, and you need to learn you can still care for yourself even if you've had a hard night.
Yes. And the fact that that's where it's hard to find the starting point, but it is, at some point you started restricting in the morning and then you ended up binging in the evening. And as you say, then you make all these promises to yourself
Yeah,
that you're going to be better tomorrow, not realizing that that restriction is the very reason you ended up where you did. And
yeah,
people want to segment these behaviors and not realize that they're
absolutely.
two halves of the same whole, they're yin and yang. You're not going to have one without the other. And
Absolutely.
also, of course, we also address binging behaviors as far as self-soothing and coping mechanism elements, because that can be a feature. It's not to say
Absolutely.
that, okay, we deal with this regularity and adequacy and variety stuff and all binging behaviors disappear. It's really compelling to see just how many of them disappear. It's the
Absolutely.
vast majority. It's more than 50%, I would say. But if there's any remaining behaviors as far as binging, then we obviously have to do the work to replace those mechanisms with adaptive coping mechanisms and to help people regulate, etc. So yeah, of course, we don't just say, well, this is all we do to address that, but it is really incredible to see once we do start working on this stuff, how much of that stuff clears up.
Absolutely, because I think really like supporting your body physiologically in terms of like getting it enough nourishment, it's going to be the foundation to work on then those psychological aspects, the emotional, the neurological aspects. But it's almost like there's no, like you're saying, like there's no point like building other parts of the house if we don't have the foundation yet. At the end of the day, it's like we could be meditating and we could be really trying to do the regulation stuff, which is going to lead into my next point.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, if you're not eating enough, it's just like you're kind of missing the point. Like we just this is what this is what it's all about.
Completely. If you're not eating enough, you are more anxious. So what are we
Absolutely.
meditating through when we could be working on the food stuff first and then see what meditation can sort of fill the gap on? But let's just figure out how much of it is because your brain's going, I'm so hungry, I can't think about anything else. I feel like I have to go into caveman survival mode.
Something I tell clients every week is that regulation is going to be the basis of all successful recovery days. So a client said to me the other day, she was like, you say the word nervous system a lot. I was like, you're not wrong. I do. I actually feel like we could do a whole episode about it. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah.
Something I'm really passionate about because your nervous system matters so much and it needs to be considered every single day, not just in the moments of immediate distress. Say, like, you're in the evening and you have a binge urge, for example. Overall, which is sort of what you're talking about as well, you want to really look at are my actions and is my lifestyle in support of balancing my nervous system, right? Like, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating enough? Are you having enough moments in the day of that down regulated time where you're just not necessarily trying to push to do anything productive, but you're just sitting or you're reading or you're doing something that feels really relaxing to you? Because regulation, it starts well before a moment of distress, right? I really think that the preventative work, like a lot of stuff in recovery, like we were just talking about in terms of eating in the morning, it's half the battle, right? This is why the little things actually do matter. Like choose to rest when your body and mind are telling you so, right? Cancel the plans if you need. Ultimately, your nervous system, it needs to feel safe and grounded and calm. And that is every individual's job to make it feel that way. I think a big thing that I really try to focus on in my life is don't unnecessarily stress out my nervous system, right? For me, that looks like boundaries sometimes on news, on screen time, on unhealthy relationships, and just even boundaries with myself to not overschedule or over exert myself mentally or physically and just ultimately allow rest. So like say that your baseline nervous system, you would describe it as like chaotic and frazzled, right? That's your baseline. If you're then in this moment of like really heightened distress, whether that's an external trigger or an internal trigger, ultimately it's going to be harder to get back to that reference point of grounded because you didn't have it at the beginning, right? So this is why our approach in coaching kind of generally, it's pretty holistic. It's about the whole person, not just can we, eat a little bit more here so that we can like get through this next day. It's like, no, let's look at the big picture of your life. Like, are you actually curating a life that is going to be supportive of a lot of longevity? So nervous system, like this is one of the most fundamental things you have to learn about in recovery, but it is transferable, I think, to every single day of your life for the rest of your life.
Yes, I remember learning about the window of tolerance
Yeah.
in my recovery process, and it just made so much sense to me in terms of where I'd been living, right at the top of that blowing the gasket part of the
Yeah.
window of tolerance, where that was my normal. So even the slightest thing, whether it was my boss just being an asshole to me or someone cutting me off in traffic or just an interaction that didn't feel good, and it would take me
Mm.
into the totally out of my area of regulation, part of the window of tolerance. And it would be so easy to then trigger a behavior or to trigger eating disorder stuff and eating disorder thoughts because it was right on the knife's edge. I just didn't have that much bandwidth between me and where my eating disorder really got most of its fuel source from, which was when I was so dysregulated. And it's such an important part of the work to bring yourself lower and lower down to that place where you've got a little bit more room to move and where you
Mm,
can observe yourself a bit more here. You can't observe yourself when you're so dysregulated. You're just in it, you're
absolutely.
in survival mode.
Yeah.
And so much of it takes practice. I love this part of the work as you do, where we're getting people to build in practices and we're getting them to experiment with things that at first they just don't believe will work or they don't believe they're capable of doing. Our history tells us so much about who we're going to be with what we retain. We're meant to be evolving and changing all the time, but I think there's so many clues in our history when I'll ask clients, what stuff you really enjoyed doing as a kid? Like
Mm,
I loved to be outside. I loved to be in the garden with my parents. I loved to read. I'm like, great. How much reading do you do? Oh, I never read. I can't stand to be still. It feels like I'm being lazy. I'm like, okay, that's where we're going to start. We're going to do like 10 minutes of reading twice this week. And that is torture to them at first, torture. And for a little while, it will be torture. And they're like, man, this is not getting better. Like this, I still feel like I cannot sit still. I still feel so guilty. It brings up so many thoughts, as it should. That's part of what we need to tackle as well. How you talk to yourself about productivity and laziness and giving yourself permission to enjoy just the joyful things that you use as outlets or, just little bright spots in your day. And then it'll get to the point, as it does with the food, as it does with everything else, where they're like, oh no, Mia, that's just normal now. I love reading. Like I do it all the time. I do it to get myself off to sleep. I, go outside in the sun and make sure I do it for at least like 30 minutes every couple of days, at least 30 minutes. So
mm,
it's so much of that practice as well, in terms of you've got to lead your nervous system. And there's going to be even discomfort in that because that feels so unsafe because it's stillness, it's observing yourself, it's being with yourself. And when you have so
mm,
little practice at that, it's a really scary thing to become familiar with again.
Oh, absolutely, it is. I really think that sweet spot for growth in recovery and life generally is moving between rest and effort and being able to cycle between those two things. But
Mhm.
you know, ultimately, this is so hard for so many people, which leads me on to one of my other points we can talk about in a little while. But we're also going to be working against like conventional society, which is like faster, now, loud,
Hustle.
noise, screens, go, like don't stop. It's like green, green, green. And you have to intentionally act in opposition to do that, to care for your nervous system. I think we were saying a few episodes ago, like even just driving in silence or like walking in silence
Mm.
just feels so peaceful because there is so much noise in the world. And I'll even notice myself, I'll just like put the radio on or do something. I'm like, why am I adding extra noise? Like I don't have to, but it just feels normal as
Yes.
opposed to there's realistically anything that's a priority you'll find time to do, like you'll make time for. And even if that is just in your day, like finding those small pockets of space where you could regulate, where you could just choose to look towards as opposed to away from yourself.
And it's so important for everyone to look at this, especially as you say, in this day and age. What an archaic way to put that, but in this day and age, and in my day, it wasn't like that. Uh, when you have things like social media, when you have things like TikTok, which people are sort of flooding their systems with first thing in the morning, I read this really great article recently that Mum put me onto, which talked about the fact that you get a certain amount of dopamine that
Mm,
you're kind of given, right? And there's certain levels of it that you utilize every day. And when you are starting your day by flooding yourself with TikTok or Instagram or even the news or whatever it might be, these little dopamine hits are kind of using up your levels of dopamine for the day, which obviously isn't great because we want that to be passed out throughout the day. But also, it stops you from being dopamine seeking in a healthier way. It stops you from maybe doing things like going and having interactions with people in real life, which would have previously been where you would seek out dopamine. So you're kind of burning through a lot of it through these little short hits of dopamine versus going and seeking them out in these more protracted ways that kind of disseminate that throughout your day and make your
mm,
day more balanced. And so we have to be so intentional with this stuff because technology is now designed to kind of work against us and to to feed into our worst instincts and into our worst biological instincts. Like you're not consciously going and looking to burn through all your dopamine, but these apps know that that's what you're going to do. So it's really important to, as you say, build in processes, build in structures, routines, which help you to work against things that you may not even be aware of, right? So once you are aware of them, yeah, putting things in place, as you say, like finding pockets in the day to down regulate. That's something that I'm actively working on at the moment, figuring out how my neurodivergence is. I'm not wired to do that. That's a real effort I have to go to. And also, what I interact with in the morning is something that I'm working on as well, because I know for sure I am one of those people who's burning through a hell of a lot of dopamine picking
Yeah.
up this rectangle in the morning.
I was talking to my sister about this the other day because she really struggles with that. She's neurodivergent and she's found that when she's really able to curate her morning in a way, and it's just some really, really simple things, it significantly supports her sustained energy through the day. And really trying to shift from leaning towards that like instant dopamine and as opposed to being like, can we get some happy hormones? Another way, like, can I like cuddle the dog and get some oxytocin? Like, can I put my face in the sunlight? Let's go for some serotonin. Some of these other hormones that can really support that energy as well.
Yeah.
But also, it all just links to this whole idea of I think when people are using social media a lot, it is a way to fill the space. It is a
Mhm.
way to feel less alone at first, I
Yeah.
think. But ultimately, when it becomes a habit that you now don't feel okay actually being alone, I think that's a problem, right? And I think we sort of see this in a different way, but it also has a lot of similarities in recovery, which is sort of my next point that you actually need to learn to be okay being alone with yourself. I think anyone who goes through recovery, sooner or later, they have to acknowledge that they're letting go of something, the eating disorder, that has taken up a lot of their life. And that could, for people, it's like routine, brain space, mental load, it's a safety net, all these different things, right? And the change of that can absolutely feel lonely.
Mhm.
And that's why I think a lot of people they can't even tolerate this idea of being alone with themselves because they're just out of practice of doing it for a really long time, right? And whether that's without the eating disorder or without plans or without scrolling or like whatever it may be, because it doesn't just obviously apply in this context. I think no one teaches us that alone doesn't have to mean that something is missing
Mm.
as right. I think it's like actually deemed as this like bad thing, right? And social media is like very supportive of that idea that like it's bad to like be alone. But I think being able to ultimately be okay with yourself, and that does look like being in your own company and being able to sit without busyness, but it also means like being able to do things on your own, like being okay in that way as well. You know, you ultimately want to be able to do things for yourself, not for affirmation as well. And I think, again, social media makes that a little bit tricky. But a great goal, I think, a point to get towards would be, you know, you don't need to be invited to something to feel wanted, or you don't need someone by your side to be able to enjoy a holiday, right? It just puts it back on the individual. And I think it can be really empowering when someone goes through this journey of ultimately it's like it's independence, it's a form of independence. Because I think it supports that person to understand their value is not going to be like proven through conversation or through like relationships or plans or social media interaction. It's already there and it's
Mhm.
always been there. Because, you know, I don't think presence should never feel like punishment. At the beginning, it will. At
Yes.
the beginning, it absolutely will. Um, but most things at the beginning are going to be hard. And I think we all in our life at some point we need to learn to live moments privately and honestly and fully. And you just gotta, I think the focus for me is like, I just want to be my own safest place. Right. And then I think that from that foundation, it feels a lot easier to interact with the world without feeling like I'm doing it to like get likes or I'm doing it so I get invited to a social plan or, you know, whatever it may be. So I think there's so many different points here that kind of come together, but ultimately it does all feed into the nervous system work because you want the goal, like obviously, you know, coaching is awesome because it's so much about goal setting and moving forwards and really giving a plan, but also like coming up with some personal goals of
Mm.
like, how do you want to show up in the world? What do you want your actions, like, what do you want the intent of your actions to be? And what's that actually going to look like trying to live into that? And yeah, having a really good conversation with yourself about like your social media interaction, I think is a huge part of that for everyone. Like there is no one who doesn't need to have this conversation with themselves
Yeah.
kind of regularly.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And I think that if you are filling up space just for the sake of not wanting to like be in that stillness and be in that presence. There can be so many sources, and the phone just happens to be the easiest one, right?
Mm.
And I think that this can also then cross over into, it's not on my list, but I was considering putting it on because obviously we've talked about social media and recovery a lot. But I think it can be a similar thing of burying yourself in like recovery social media and thinking that that's a replacement for connection and
Yeah.
in real person in real life person to person community. And that's not to say that there isn't value to finding safe healthy communities online with recovery, absolutely, but it's meant to be part of a picture. It's not meant to be the whole picture.
Yes.
And I think that people can kind of kid themselves sometimes into thinking that if they immerse themselves in that stuff, that that's a replacement for the actual day to day in your own
Mm.
lane work they need to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be like another form, like we've spoken about. We did a whole episode on of busy work.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Big one that has always been a common feature of probably most client relationships I've had
Mm.
is you are not the unicorn. You are
Mm.
not the one who is the outlier in terms of you are just in this little silo all by yourself and you don't have any crossover with anybody in the eating disorder realm, right? Like we all have a through line. We don't all have the exact same experience or the exact same background. But it's very interesting to me when people will say, oh no, Mia, that won't work for me, or I can't do that, or I'm exempt from, for instance, they'll say, no, no, when we do a dialogue, mine's just going to keep going. And like, there's no answers for all of my eating disorder thoughts. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just try first and we'll see if I found the unicorn. Or, oh no, Mia, I'm the person who doesn't need to eat breakfast. That won't make a difference for me. And I'm like, okay, well, let's test it and then let's find out if that's actually true. There's a lot of terminal uniqueness that eating disorder likes to convince itself of, that we are the one, we are the exempt one, we are the one that, recovery isn't possible for, or XYZ won't work for. And it's not to say that we put everybody through a cookie cutter program of everything works for everyone in exactly the same way. But I'm talking more so the people who are like, no, nothing will work.
Mm.
Nothing will help. Nothing will work. Nothing's going to make a difference.
Mm.
And it's really nice to find out that you are wrong. And the amount of times I've got to the end of the working relationship with a client, and when we sort of do a summary and a looking back of the work that we've done and where they started, and particularly where their mentality was when they started versus what their thinking is now, the proving themselves wrong that they were not the unicorn is such a fundamental part of their process and how they got to good outcomes, was realizing that yeah, they're not the one who's off on the sideline being like, oh yeah, everybody else can or everybody else will, but not me.
Mm.
Um, and it's an understandable thought process from eating disorder self because it's very protective, because it's like, well, why? It's kind of the why bother trying? I already know it's not going to work. Why
Mm.
bother trying? I already know I can't do it. And that is the beauty of the work that we get to do in terms of dealing with people individually and treating people as individuals and not putting them through cookie cutter processes, is that we're going to find what's going to work for you. And so I understand where the unicorn mentality can come from, because a lot of people have gone through treatment programs and, processes which have been very across the board. We just do the same thing with everyone. And so they do sort of learn, well, that didn't work for me and that didn't work for me and that didn't work for me. But when they're treated as an individual, it's about us finding the things that are going to create sort of the combined superpower for you. There's not one singular thing which is going to cure an eating disorder. There's a multitude of things that we're weaving together. And for each person, it's going to be a slight variation of what we figure out in our experiment, in our work together, that is going to work for you as an individual. So,
Mm.
yeah, releasing the idea that you are the unicorn, you are the one person with an eating disorder who doesn't have anything in common with anybody else who has an eating disorder, is a difficult thing to let go of, but it's a fundamental part of overall getting to the outcomes you want to get to. And just challenging the thinking first and foremost.
For sure. And I also think once someone's able to overcome, will understand and then overcome their attachment to this idea of like, I'm different or I'm special or, I'm this unicorn, they can really use that to their advantage. I love when you like see in clients' dialogues and like their response to things where it's like, we're not a unicorn, like coming up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so key because it's it's such a fuel source for eating disorder. It is
Yeah.
such a fuel source.
Yeah,
It's
it
kind of
absolutely.
it's kind of like the thinking of, well, I'm not going to recover because I don't know what's going to happen. It's that thinking, right? So why bother trying? Like, I'm the unicorn, so why bother trying? I don't know what's going to happen to me in recovery for certain. I can't, don't no one's giving me guarantees, so I'm not going to try. And something that I do with clients when they get stuck in that thinking is,
Mm.
okay, in 5 years, let's say the eating disorder comes back into the driver's seat in a completely dominant way and healthy self is out of the car. Where are you going to be in 5 years? What is life going to look like specifically if eating disorder from this day forward is completely in the driver's seat behind the steering wheel? Tell me, what are your relationships going to be like? What are you going to be doing for work? What are you going to be doing for schooling? What is your relationship with yourself going to look like? Where could you possibly be? And they have no answers. They're like, I have no idea. I would hope I would still be here, but
Mm.
I have no idea. I have no specifics. Okay, so then your eating disorder has even less guarantees than recovery has. So you have absolutely nothing to lose. Every
Mm-hmm.
single time your eating disorder points at recovery, it's got three fingers pointing back at itself. So when it says, well, you don't know what's going to happen to you in recovery, we actually have some really good indicators generally of what happens to people in recovery. Specifically, like the setup of your life is maybe harder to predict. But if we then point the same question back, okay, well, where are we going to be in 5 or 10 or 20 years with you running the show? It's very bad at running itself through its own means test of how effective it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because there's a lot of really nasty eating disorders out there that would love to tell you you can't do these things and it's all going to be too hard. And I think such a big thing that I found really valuable in my own recovery and talk to clients about all the time is that that's going to happen and you have to do it scared sometimes. Like you have to do it anxious. You're probably going to be scared a lot of the time, but that doesn't mean that you can't do the thing. Like eating disorders love to say, I can't. Like you say, you'll even say something to a client, their instant response, like, I can't do that. It's like, well, I can't do that right now with how I'm feeling and the skills that I have,
Yes.
right? Like you've said a million times, like you can't see into the future,
Yeah.
right? And I think even just someone being able to like stop and pause and be like, oh, that perspective is actually really useful because yeah, okay, I'm saying I can't do it right now, but that was a default. I didn't even think about it. It's like, well, actually, what you're saying is I'm scared. Like no one's
Yeah.
holding a gun to your head. Like we actually probably can do it. We just need to figure out how to do it.
Yes, the language that you're using in recovery is so important. So much of the focus that I have with clients is, what are you saying to yourself? What language are you using? What language are you allowing your eating disorder to use unchallenged? Like, I help you be confident. I reduce your anxiety. I help you manage big emotions. Let's actually dig into that and see if that's a definition of regulation or anxiety management or confidence that we would accept for somebody else. If it's not, then you don't get your own Oxford dictionary where like you get to get your own eating disorder definitions for you that don't apply to anybody else on the planet.
So true, so true. So my next one is life's too short to have a low opinion of yourself. Because at the end of the day, we are all born with ourselves and we're going to die with ourselves. And that needs to be the most important relationship you'll ever have. So of course you want it to be a kind and loving one. And you could do all the busy work, you could read all the books, you could do the courses, figure out your life, the friends, the job, etc. But at the end of the day, if you're looking in the mirror and you're just talking shit to yourself, you've missed the point, right? Like we were just saying, that inner narrative, that conversation is so foundational of self-worth and self-belief.
Mhm.
And being able to get into that conversation with yourself daily and work to really find that healthy self, whatever that sounds like for you. This is who you are, but you have to choose to let that voice flourish, right? And I think then to add like the extra layer onto that is you don't want to miss life because you feel like the body that you may desire is going to give you that life. Like when I was younger, I absolutely did this. And I often think to this day, like imagine if I just didn't allow myself to like go out of the house and do the things I wanted to do or like surf or, put myself out there to make friends because I thought that the body was the thing that was going to make me brave enough to do all of those things,
Mhm.
right? Um, I think it's so important to remember like having a dream body or what you perceive as that doesn't make you safe and it doesn't give you a better relationship with yourself. It makes you scared and it puts you in a place of lack. So I feel like that aspect is so important when thinking about life is too short to have a low opinion of yourself
Mhm.
because life is, again, it's not happening once you've recovered or like once you hit that milestone. It's happening right here, today, not next year, not after your next diet. It's literally today. And I think it's such a tragedy to miss it. And trying to get in conversation with yourself is something that everyone can do, like in their quiet moments, like if you're literally just brushing your teeth, even. And that is really like the beginning of it, of being able to meet that healthy self, because it takes time and it takes consistent effort. But, your opinion of yourself, it's really the only one that matters. So you want to work on it. You want to make it kind. You want to make it beautiful. I don't know. I just think I've had so many reflections lately that life is just so short and things change all the time. And there's so much that is so fleeting. And that relationship with yourself, like you're always going to be able to make amends. Like there's always going to be another moment where you can be like, okay, can I talk to myself differently today? Can I show up a little bit differently? Because I think it is really so fundamental to overall well-being and just how much you're actually going to be able to be present in your life and enjoy your life, right? I think it's so easy. Like, we see people all the time that they've got it all like figured out, right? Air quotes, figured out. But they're so deeply unhappy.
Yes.
And it's like, well, I wonder what their relationship with their self is like. Like, what are they saying to themselves? What's that inner narrative? Because
Hmm.
it's you that you've got it. There's just you every single day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think until you sort of do some of this work, whether it's not recovery, but like general self-development work or say a psychologist or something, you can really just be living your life and not realizing like that's something you should be doing. Or there is a conversation to be had there.
I observed this having sort of had my platform for 12, 13 years now, whatever it is. And it'll be so interesting. Especially when I started the business, and I will
Mm.
hear from people and they want to do the work.
Yeah.
And then they get spooked. We experience this, right? Where like we get the call booked and then no one shows, which is fine, which is
Everyone gets
fine.
spooked.
No
Yeah.
judgment if that happens. We get it. We get it. It's part of the deal. And then you'll get the email and they got spooked. And then it'll be years and I'll hear from that person again.
Mm.
And when I look at the date when they first reached out to me and then the current date, my heart breaks for them a little bit. I
Yeah.
just think that's time, that's this, here's this time stamp on that sort of period that they've been
Mm.
struggling. And it also speaks to the roundabout thing we've talked about, which is sometimes it's about poking your head up a little bit and checking out the landscape. And then it's taking a little bit of a longer look. And then it's, crawling out and getting a little bit more into the sunshine and figuring out, okay, we're actually quite safe out here. And that's got to be specific for everyone, right? That's why we say we're treating individuals. We're not saying, well, why is it taking you so long? Or why is it, harder for you to maybe get your foot on the gas pedal and go. That's why we come from the concept of, you have full autonomy, you have full agency, we're here to support you, and, no judgment in terms of what that process looks like for you. And you are an individual person. We're not putting you through a cookie cutter. That is, I think, one of the most important mirrors we can hold up is time. It's one
Yeah.
of the most profound moments in sessions when even something as simple as people saying, I can't get off the scales, Mia. I just can't. Like it's something I have to do. Do you see yourself doing that in 5 years? No. Do you see yourself doing that in 1 year? No. Then when does that stop? Oh, okay. Right. So it's putting the reality of here's where we are and here's where we want to be. And what's between there is time and choices. That's it. Which
Totally.
is so fundamental to this process, is showing people like this control and this agency and this sense of predictability they've been trying to create in their eating disorder, which is, it might feel like it's within you and it's part of you, but it is like everything else we talk about trying to control through the external world, right? Trying to control body, trying to control status, trying to control how we're perceived. That's an eating disorder, although it's an illness you have within you temporarily, because you weren't born with it, is also an external means of control. And the lesson of I am in control, this is up to me, and where I can find healthy, positive control in my life, that is the remedy to this sense of unsafety and needing protection and needing predictability that I've found in these rigidities and these rules and these behaviors.
Yeah.
And yeah, time plus choice, I think, is one of the most profound ways we can be like, this is you getting the control back. And there's nothing wrong with wanting control, by the way. Like, find me someone on the planet who doesn't want some degree of control over what's going to happen to them and the trajectory of their lives. It's about finding the healthy mechanisms of control. And one of them is, yeah, looking at the reality of where you are, where you want to be, and what can you actually functionally do to get yourself to where you'd like to be instead of mundane it, waiting for it to be different, um, waiting for some external thing to give you permission or make it possible, like a body size or somebody else's approval or somebody else doing the work for you, some treatment program doing some magical thing in 3 months that it can't do. Yeah, it's the autonomy and agency from within that is, I think, just such a fundamental staying well element of recovery.
Oh, it's so important. I think I love the idea that, our life is just a collection of choices. That's it, made in response to our environment over again and again and again.
Mm.
And it really does, so every single point we've spoken about, I think the common thread between them all is that they're putting this individual, whoever it is, in the driver's seat of their own life.
Yeah.
Because I think this may have been one of the ones that we spoke about last week. I can't remember. But no one's coming to save you
No.
at the end of the day, and like we can give you the tools, we can highlight the path, we can give you a highlighter. You got to do the work at the end of the day. These are your choices and it's your life. And these little decisions, whether it's to regulate or whether it's to just pause, they actually all do matter. And it's the little decisions that are ultimately going to add up to the big decisions that make the big changes. And you're going to look back and be like, oh, it actually did matter that I had breakfast 30 minutes within waking up.
Yes. And also, if your eating disorder is telling you breakfast doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if I have it, then it shouldn't matter if you do have it. If it doesn't matter that much, then have it.
Yeah, I love that argument.
Like, snacks don't matter. They're not that important. Great, then have it then. Not a big deal. If it's
Okay,
not a big
no
deal,
biggie.
make it not a big deal. Into my next one, which is there is no alternative option to eating the food if we are talking about re-nourishing, weight restoring, or restoring your period. And re-nourishing, weight, all these things, can apply to different behavioral profiles, different body sizes, etc. And it is just the absolute hard recovery truth. There is no alternative. I will sometimes, obviously, because of what I do, I will get fed content sometimes within the recovery community where there are videos of people talking about their recovery, and I will see in the comments, or a creator will be responding to somebody's comment who's saying, what supplements are you taking to get your period back? Like, what exercise routine? Like, what this, what that? It's every question other than, like, in terms of the food stuff, how are we getting our period back? And that is just so indicative of the fact that eating disorder, as I think we talked about last episode, is always trying to find the third option. Like, yeah, okay, let's get our period back, but I don't want to do the things that really scare me. I want to do all these other kind of busy work things. There is just no alternative. There is, in terms of your anxiety, in terms of some of that physiological stuff that eating disorder creates, like distress, like heightened body dysmorphia, right? Like when we are weight suppressed, when we are not nourishing ourselves enough, there is an extra level of fear and layer of fear in terms of our body changing, has been my observation. That doesn't mean that it does all the body image work to re-nourish and to eat enough. Absolutely not. There is still body image work to do, and there is body image distress and body image beliefs to work through. But there is just this extra layer that seems to be created by not eating enough. And as we've talked about, not eating enough includes regularity, it includes, yes, adequacy, but it's also all these other forms, like not eating the variety of food in terms of all the food groups. You can be eating enough, but not eating enough if you're not eating all the food groups. There just is no alternative to this. And people will kind of do a lot of busy work and a lot of like running around the core issue before they realize they're just getting exhausted because they are being so avoidant of the core issue. And at the same time, they'll be saying to you, I want to feel better, Mia. Like, I just feel so distressed and I just feel so anxious. And for a part of the process, our answer is a bit boring and repetitive, which is like, well, that's because you're not yet eating enough. That's
Yeah.
because the body still doesn't feel safe. The brain still doesn't feel safe. It is still in that constant hyper vigilant, when am I going to get enough? Where can I get enough from? How can I use the fuel source I am being given to distribute it around everything that I need to keep going? including your brain, including your organs, including your uh, all your senses, your ability to just
Mm,
operate during your day, your ability to connect, your ability to be
okay,
cognitively
well,
functioning, right?
yeah.
Like there's so much your poor body is trying to do with this not enough amount. And so, yeah, that can be a little bit of a frustrating point for people when they're like, you keep saying the same thing. And it's like, that's because, again, there is just no cheat option. There's no other option.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony of eating disorders, you're always running up against these ironies of it wants to feel better and it's just burying itself further into things that are making you more and more distressed. And the thing it has you fearing the most is actually the answer. That is the thing that is going to soothe and solve so much of this overall distress and anxiety and dysmorphia and all the things that you tell us that you want to resolve is in the direction of the thing that feels like a hot stove, right? And you just don't want to put your hand on it.
Mm. I see people, a lot of people sort of get stuck with that as well. Say they've done the work to get up to eating a meal plan, but it might sort of and this is someone who may need to weight restore, but it might just be a base meal plan. It's a starting point, and they're not feeling like they can like go ahead of that, or like do it differently, or do it in a different way, or like add anything else extra to it.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of coming. It's like, okay, well, I can do this much, but like I'm only gonna like let out the leash this much. But ultimately, to get to that place where your body is feeling like you have that feeling of like, I feel vital, like I have energy, like I can process, like I feel like I have a bit of a buffer with my immune system, like I'm not getting sick all the time, all these aspects.
Yeah.
It does look like the body has to be driving the show. And that means there needs to be a trust in the body, and you have to trust the body, but the body also has to trust you.
Yes.
And there needs to be this safety that you're going to know when you're eating enough. Like your body is going to be responding differently, and you will know. But to be able to know, you also have to be honest with yourself. And
Yes.
I think having that, like that brutal honesty with yourself is so important.
It's kind of like what we were talking about before with the binging behaviors that, yes, of course, if there are some remaining elements of binging which are for just coping and regulation, that we'll deal with that once we know that it's not coming from restriction and it's not coming from all of these sort of more biological, physiological elements. It's the same thing here when people are like, I'm so distressed and I'm so anxious. And Mia, that can't all be because of restriction. It's like, we don't know yet.
Exactly.
We just
Exactly.
don't know. And so we can keep delaying it. And I can give you all of these skills and tools. And it's literally just like, you know, square peg round hole at the moment. It's just not really going to
Totally.
do anything until we know what we're dealing with and what the actual shape of your distress is outside of where it's coming from physiologically and biologically.
Yeah.
Or why, I don't know if you've had situations like this, but I have had a few clients in the past where they also have some comorbidities in terms of chronic illnesses or like just mystery physical ailments which are bothering.
Yeah. Yeah.
They will go to every specialist on the planet, but the thing they avoid is recovery. They avoid this bit. And I'm like, you're really not going to know how much of this is either creating, contributing to, or exacerbating all this stuff that you're running around trying to fix. And they're so frustrated because they can't get a solution or an answer for any of this stuff. Well, we do have answers for this thing. We do know what to do for eating disorder stuff. So why don't we tackle that, see what's left, see how many of these symptoms remain, and then you've got a little bit more information and data to be able to go and resolve whatever might be remaining. But again, you might be surprised what is actually remaining once we do the work we know we need to do in recovery.
Which again, it's also why it's so important for specialists, all kind of specialists, to be on top of this work as
Yes.
well. Checking in is someone's foundations of literally meeting their basic nutritional needs there. Are
Yeah.
they actually eating enough? Because even like, so many women, particularly sort of in their 30s, when they're like thinking about, do I want to have kids? This is a part of life that I want to open myself up to, trying
Right.
to manage their hormones. Like the
Yep.
number one reason that causes like so many hormonal issues is restriction.
Yes. And menopause. How
Yes.
many women do like
Oh my
I've have
gosh.
many clients where that has become just such a confusing process for them in a time
Mhm.
that's already quite confusing because the eating disorder is, yeah, getting mixed up with this hormonal process. And it's just, yeah, very hard to tell what's coming from where until, as you say, like the foundational stuff is pretty clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's some hard truths today, everyone.
Yeah, we came out swinging on this one.
we came, we came out swinging that you need to eat breakfast with
Yeah.
it
I
hasn't
know last week I was like, well, we're not going to be really specific. And then this week I was like, so do this and do that. And here's your to-do list for this week.
Well, I hope from everything that we've said, everyone has maybe had a bit of tough love, but in the best possible way, and you've learned something. We will be back in a fortnight to talk more about recovery. But as always, let us know if there's anything you would like us to talk about, recovery and beyond, that is, because we just love getting together and having these chats.
Yeah, and we have some really great apps coming up that we've got on our list. But as Hol said, any suggestions, we're always here for them. Hol, thank you for being with me for another week. I will
Oh,
see
thank
you
you.
soon.
It's a pleasure. I'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.